and I'm the Director of Exhibition Strategy and Senior Curator of Art at the Oakland Museum of California. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So it's May Day, International Workers' Day. And I'm reminded of something that Jen said in OE 101 at the very beginning of this conference. As you know, we're at the tail end of day 2. But Jen said gratitude is part of our work. So I want to express a little gratitude because it is the last time we'll be all together formally. So hold your applause. There's going to be a lot of love. As you know, the National Consortium came together in addition to the Oakland Museum of California, the California College of the Arts, UIC School of Art and Art History, Lisa, Queens Museum, and A Blade of Grass. So big hand of applause to the consortium members. Our commitment to support open engagement over the course of the 3 years with other consortium members was funded in part by a James Irvine Foundation grant. And so thank you, James Irvine. And also, I want to point out that the contribution of 10Q to transform our High Bay Gallery into this majestic space that we're all enjoying tonight. So, Jeff, where are you? 10Q people, thank you. Tonight's keynotes was supported by the Stephen M. Silverstein Foundation. Thank you, Stephen. With additional funding by Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Other in-kind support by UC Berkeley Arts Research Center, Starline Social Club, Human Hotel, and Batted Sports. So, yes, let's keep working. That's our work. So I also wanted to point out that our leaders, Jen de los Reyes, who was Voice of God, visionary founder, goddess, badass goddess, right there, visionary founder of Open Engagement. Kelly McKinley. Kelly, where are you? My boss. Who is the person who initially saw the value that open engagement offered to the Oakland Museum of California as a learning and growing opportunity. Thank you, Kelly. Evelyn Arantes, who is our partner. She's our curator of public practice. She was, Evelyn, where are you? She was an incredible partner in content and invitation. Also, I want to sort of talk a little bit about the collaborative nature of putting this conference together. So Eileen Hansen, where are you? No. So Eileen Hansen, she's an Oakland Museum staff member, and then Crystal Baxley, the Open Engagement Assistant Director. They formed, actually, a new institution. It was the Institution of Get It Done, so thank you. Big hugs to other OE staff member, Lakeisha Leek, the other assistant director, Shiro Prajapati, expansion specialist, Ariana Jacob, analog specialist, Nicole Lavelle, creative director, Sarah Bao, graphic designer, Tarin Kawart, graphic design, Alex Harris, webmaster, Alex Winters, social media. Are all digital people named Alex? Lexa Walsh, local support and on-site coordinator, and Sophia Fish, the most amazing open engagement intern ever. And then lastly, a shout out to the many volunteers for open engagement and the Oakland Museum staff who ran such an incredibly smooth, responsive conference. More gratitude work. I want to thank our patron supporters for open engagement, Shelley Rubin, Rachel Basie, Kate Wyvell, Lisa Lee, Sophie Hill, Wesley Demling, Sherry Willis, Darcy Foreman, Riza Wilson, Tatiana Hernandez, Margaret Leninger, and the University of Louisville. Thank you. So I think we've all felt that this conference has been amazing. The only words I could put it, it's been full-throated and we put our hearts on our sleeves. And I think that was shown by last night's keynote by Suzanne Lacey, who, after a long day, energized and inspired us. I think Suzanne and Angela Davis are complementary figures who've been doing work before it had a name or it was called something else. In Suzanne's case, there was no such term called social practice. And in Angela's case, the terms were different. It was the Vietnam War. Now it's the War on Terror. The most powerful Black Power organization then, when Angela was first became known, was the Black Panther Party, and now it's Black Lives Matter. So we all have a relationship with Angela. There are many threads that connect us to her and her to us. She's done so much. She's been an incredible leader in coalition building among various communities for struggle for economic, racial, and gender justice. She's been an incredible educator, training our young people to be better people at many universities across the country. She's a writer and international lecturer. And by the way, she has a new book called Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I recommend we all buy it today. But what she's most known for is her work around as a founding member of Critical Resistance, and also drawing from her experience being the object of state repression. So we thank her for her unerring focus on the prison industrial complex. But I should say, that my connection with Angela has a particular meaning to my role here. For me, she was this sort of disembodied, iconic spirit that was out there. There was a little bit of Che Guevara and Beyonce all together. I think that's a pretty good estimation. But when my first year here, our friends at Creative Time and Mark Tribe, Mark, are you here? Approached me. Mark Tribe was doing a project called the Port Huron Project, which is now a classic piece in the social practice canon. It was a series of reenactments of incredibly important New Left speeches from the 60s and 70s. And basically, he traveled across the country hiring actors to reenact significant speeches at the exact location they happened. So, of course, they approached us because we were the Oakland Museum of California, and they knew we were committed to expressing the history of this very, very special place. So they said, we want to do an Angela Davis speech at DeFremery Park. I think the speech was from 1969. And so this gave me a special opportunity to ground myself in the work of a museum in the neighborhoods and communities that we wanted to serve. But I should say that was an incredible experience for those who were there. It was a very interesting combination of watching a film being made, but also experiencing this speech and seeing how what Angela said many years ago echoed with what was going on there. And so it was a really incredible view of authentic response to things said many, many years before. So I think that demonstrates Angela's power to affect art and people coming together across time and space. And that's why I'm very thrilled to have her here today. I'll share one last thing that, so that was many, many years ago, 2007, 2008, and then open engagement happened. And then I will out Jen. It was her idea, Suzanne Lacey and Angela Davis as keynotes. And so there was a time when we approached Angela, just gauging initial interest, availability, et cetera. And then something terrible happened, something horrible. Again, the shooting in Charleston. I think it was a Wednesday. I got home. My wife said, there's a terrible thing that happened. And I just couldn't believe that I didn't know it until my wife told me. I was shocked. It was something different. It was a level of evil and insanity that that I couldn't comprehend. I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed. I wrote an email to Angela. For me, it was clear why we needed her at Open Engagement. We needed her to galvanize us again, to see the world for what it was, and have the courage and insight to tell it like it is, and to energize us to make things better. I wrote her an email, sent it at 2 in the morning. The next day, she said yes. So thank you, Angela. So here I am, here Angela is, and here we all are together. I think this is an opportunity for us to create that moment when Angela spoke at Defremery Park, so that we can affect time and space into the future. So thank you for being here. This will be an incredibly special night. Angela, can you come up for a quick second? And I'll take this back to your seat. So Friday night, when we opened, there was an open engagement project by Natalie Ball. She's a Native American, and she taught us what a war hoop was, how to voice our power and energy together. And then at the end of a very long night, Natalie came up to me and said, "Listen, I cannot make Angela's talk. Would you give this to her?" So, Angela from Natalie. Angela Davis.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And here are your notes. Wow. This is an exciting moment. I can feel the excitement in the air. We're in Oakland. And it is May 1st, International Workers' Day. And we gather on colonized land, the land of the Ohlone, a place with a very rich history, a place where 50 years ago, the Black Panther Party was founded. We are here in Oakland among artists, other cultural workers, educators, activists, organizers. We are here in Oakland, where we all know that Black lives matter. Oakland has, and I just recently learned this, but it makes sense, Oakland has the highest concentration of artists per capita of any other city in the United States. Did you know that? I mean, I know some of you did. And Oakland is the home of the Black Panther Party. Oakland is the home of Oscar Grant. Oakland is the home of Occupy, of critical resistance, of Black Lives Matter. And although TGI Justice Project is physically located across the bay, it was in Oakland for a while, and the Transgender, Gender Variant, Intersex Justice Project has a very strong presence in the Oakland abolitionist movement. And so Oakland is an amazing place. It's an amazing place for the anti-policing, anti-prison, restorative justice, and radical education movements, for the disabled movements, for environmental movements, for food sovereignty movements. Oakland is a place where art and politics are always clashing, always interacting, and sometimes converging. So I would like to express my gratitude to René de Guzman and Jen de los Reyes, and all of the other organizers of this conference for inviting me to participate in these creative deliberations on the theme of power. And I understand that this conference initiates a 3-year cycle of gatherings, this year on the theme of power here in Oakland, next year on the theme of justice in Laquan McDonald's Chicago, where the city government seriously needs to learn some lessons on the meaning of justice. And the following year in New York on sustainability. And of course, the environmental movements, water and food movements, constitute ground zero of the quest for social justice. The children of Flint, Michigan, are teaching us that we can no longer even take water for granted. No radical social transformation is ever imaginable without the pivotal role of art and culture. The theme of this conference is power. And of course, since we're in Oakland, we cannot help but add to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people. And thus we remember the founding of the Black Panther Party 50 years ago. Yes, even the young ones are remembering. That's historical memory. Bobby Seale and Huey Newton were students at Merritt College when they founded the Black Panther Party. This is an image created by Henry Taylor in 2007, and he's one of the countless numbers of artists who have been inspired by the work of the Black Panther Party. This one is included in the current Whitney exhibition of portraits from the collection of the Whitney Museum. As a matter of fact, there was an article in the art section of the New York Times on Friday. During that era, vast numbers of artists were inspired by the Black Panther Party, whose work often inspired others to make art and to make change. Elizabeth Catlett, for example. This is her 1993 homage to the Panthers. And this is the wood sculpture that is entitled Black Unity, which she made in 1968, but you have to see the other side of the fist. See? And this one, homage to my Black sisters, presaging Black Lives Matter and its distinctly feminist and queer dimension. Of course, it's impossible to evoke visual art related to the Black Panther Party without acknowledging Emory Douglas, who represents the powerful, continued legacy of the Black Panther Party. And this is the logo, which he created, inspired by the Lowndes County Freedom Democratic Party in Alabama, and competing with the elephant and the donkey. And the Black Panther Party newspaper. This is Abdullah Ibrahim, who's been performing across the bay at the SF Jazz Center the last couple of days. And some of you may recognize this. Do you recognize this tune? Mannenberg.
Voice of America, Washington, represent DC.
We were in Cape Town in a recording studio, and it was just at the time of what became known as the Soweto uprising. First line that I played on it, I don't know where it came from, it just said, and then the musicians picked it up, and then we got a little bridge going up, and we recorded it. I think it was about 17 minutes, and that's just one take. And then we went back to record the other music. But we kept on thinking, well, something had happened with that recording that we just did. And so we asked the engineer to play it back. And we realized what had happened is that they had captured the spirit and the mood of the nation at that time. And it was confirmation, an affirmation of our cultural and political inheritance. And the public or the people picked up the song, and it was played and sung everywhere. And in some regards, it has become almost like this unofficial anthem, national anthem of South Africa.
Our guest of the week on Jazz Beat is the iconic South African pianist, flutist, composer, and band leader Abdullah Ibrahim.
So in that interview, Abdullah Ibrahim pointed out that when Nelson Mandela heard Mannenberg, he said, "Liberation is near." Abdullah Ibrahim talks about his approach to art, and he says that oftentimes, in order to generate the power that we need, softness is required. He says, softness overcomes the hardness. Even in that horrendous system, he said, that we lived under in South Africa, we learned from our parents and grandparents and our teachers that softness will overcome. As I listen to Abdullah Ibrahim, it becomes clear to me why this conference, open engagement, is so important. Because the softness he speaks about, it seems to me, is a place of reflection, a place of imagination, a place of possibility. A song, an image, or any other work of art can push us to travel to universes beyond, to places animated by freedom and justice, not only in, or not primarily in the sense of discovering the fact of freedom and justice once and for all, but rather in the sense of discovering a motion, a constant movement that is both comforting and troubling, the sense that wherever we land, we have to continue to move. recognize this waters from an ancient well. Can you put it down just a little bit? So art plays a pivotal role in shaping the awareness of people who can change the world. The philosopher Herbert Marcuse once pointed out that art can contribute to changing the consciousness and drives of the men and women and all who can change the world. So I think there's an affinity between art and critical engagements with the world. Whether implicitly or explicitly, art challenges the status quo. It challenges the world as it is. Both art and critical theory direct our attention away from what is, away from the given, away from the facticity of the world, and they point elsewhere. They point towards possibility, and this happens through the power of negation. If, according to Marcuse, art is negation and possibility, and if critical theory relies on negative dialectics to focus our attention on and beyond what is in order to make room for what might be, then one can argue that this is precisely the power we need to generate. Critical engagements, critical theory, critical resistance. About 20 years ago, I became involved in a movement we call critical resistance beyond the prison industrial complex. And some of you who are from Oakland may remember this poster. Does anybody remember this poster? This is an image that was created by Rupert Garcia, an Oakland artist. And I can tell you that in all of the organizing we did to bring people together from all over the world to begin to talk about dismantling the prison industrial complex, the beginnings of the current abolitionist movement, perhaps the most interesting and most intense conversations revolved around the poster. Because there were those, of course, who wanted bars and chains. And so we fought about this. Some of us said, well, if the poster contains bars and chains and all of the objects that make people think they already know about what it is we're trying to accomplish, then they'll walk right by. We need something that is going to speak to them in a different way, something that is going to educate them from the outset. And so I've been friends with Rupert Garcia for many years. So I went to Rupert and I said, Rupert, we need a poster. Do you have any ideas? We don't want the usual, bars and chains and handcuffs and all of that. And so we talked, and he thought about it. And then he said, I think I know exactly what you need. He said, I've been working on this image of an eye. And it's the eye of surveillance, but also it is the eye that envisions the future. Because the backdrop is a wonderful sunrise. And so this is how we ended up with this image as the poster. And believe me, I think it played a major role in attracting the 3,500 people to the conference, particularly when we were expecting 350. And I had known Rupert's work from the 70s. This is this amazing anti-war poster, Fuera de Indochina. And I've always loved the quiet power of his portraits of Frida Kahlo. And initially I was reluctant to include the next slide. But then I realized that I need to acknowledge, 45 years later, the work that his art performed in the movement that secured my freedom. So thank you, Rupert Garcia. And the freedom of others. This is Reverend Ben Chavis and the Wilmington 10. Unfortunately, the slide isn't of the best quality, but this was the 1976 March on Raleigh for Labor and Human Rights, organized by the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And of course, this tradition continues. Here is a poster by Emory Douglas calling for the freedom of Mumia Abu Jamal. One of Mumia's most ardent supporters was Oakland resident Yuri Kochiyama. And here is an image calling for the protection of Assata. Yes. Now, I've been talking about critical thinking, critical theory, critical resistance, and if Abdullah Ibrahim tells us that power does not always have to be aggressive and destructive, that it can be soft and transformative and interdisciplinary and reflexive, and it can help transform our worlds and purge them of domination and oppression and make them more habitable for human and all other beings. Critical power, critical resistance, thus rely on and educate the imagination. The imagination is central to our thought processes. It's central to the process of producing and engaging with art. Now, I want to tell you that when I was a young graduate student, I found it very helpful to study Immanuel Kant. Obviously, I was a philosophy student. And one of the reasons I decided to include these observations in my talk today is because I've had a couple of interesting encounters with young students who are reluctant to read the work of what they call dead white men. And you know, it may be the case that a lot of that work will not be helpful. But we have to realize that this is the world we live in, and we have to understand that world, and therefore we have to understand everything about it. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I found Kant really provocative and really helpful. And I was impressed by the way, in his ideas, aesthetics assumes the most pivotal position because art and the aesthetic judgment, this is the term he uses, can represent freedom in a way that is impossible using discursive means. As a matter of fact, he argues that freedom is a moral concept, but beauty can be the symbol of morality. This is, if you're interested in reading it further, you can look at the Immanuel Kant's critique of judgment. And it argues that the ability to be moved by something that is beautiful, the ability to be moved by a work of art points to a human capacity to use the imagination in a way that is not confined by our usual cognitive processes. And I think that one of the problems in our schools today is our children do not learn the value of the imagination. We can say that, art can teach us things that can teach us lessons that are nowhere to be found anywhere else. Knowledges that have always eluded conceptual thought can be rendered possible through art. And I'm going to quote Marcuse again, who in his last book wrote, "Inasmuch as art preserves with the promise of happiness the memory of the goals that fail." Inasmuch as art preserves with the promise of happiness the memory of the goals that fails, it can enter as a regulative idea into the desperate struggle for changing the world. Against all fetishism of the productive forces, against the continued enslavement of individuals by objective conditions which remain those of domination, art represents the ultimate goal of all revolutions: the freedom and the happiness of individuals. This is the power of art. Art can drive people to struggle for economic and political and educational and sexual power. So if we want to talk about the struggle to change the world, this requires us to engage with power. This requires us to bring politics into the frame. And so therefore I want to move to a discussion of the Black radical tradition, where art, philosophical perspectives, and politics have always been enmeshed. The most consistent philosophical theme in the history of Black people all over the world, and I'm specifically referring to the Americas now, though, that theme has been the quest for freedom. It has always been taken for granted that the United States of America is the oldest democracy in the world, and that France is the second oldest, right? But we know that both American and French democracies recognize no contradiction between their endorsement of slavery and the slave trade on the one hand, and their proclamations of human equality on the other. So we're talking about democracies that were inherently elitist. Elitist democracy. I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? But that's what we've been working with. As a matter of fact, they were democracies of the minority. On the other hand, the Haitian Revolution, led by Toussaint Louverture, gave rise to the world's first non-racial democracy. In the 1805 Haitian constitution conceived by Jacques de Dessalines, all citizens, regardless of their racial background, were designated as black. And in this manner, and I'm quoting a political theorist, Siba Grovogui, in this manner, black became a symbol around which to organize national solidarity and public life. As a result, black thus was not an exclusionary category. By this constitutional gesture, the black majority welcomed all others to rejoice in the identity of the majority. From the very beginning, the subject of democracy has been race as white. The subject of human rights has been clandestinely raced as white. So Grovogui asked, why cannot we imagine humanity as exemplified by those who have been most suppressed, as exemplified by those who have had to rely on their own collective struggle for freedom to define the very meaning of humanity? Why is it so difficult to envision black humanity as representative of all humanity that can aspire toward a universal? Haiti's constitution proclaimed all citizens to be black by virtue of their citizenship. If our freedom dreams, to use Robin Kelly's wonderful phrase, can be enriched by this proposition, what happens if we imagine black women as the measure of humanity? Racial hierarchies were temporarily overturned by the Haitian Revolution, establishing a goal toward which we continue to aspire today. One of those unfulfilled promises that Marcuse was referring to. If racial hierarchies need to be overturned, so too do gender hierarchies. Zora Neale Hurston reminded us that the black woman is the mule of the world. So what if the mules of the world become the very measure of humanity? This would be real power. And this is the question that has been posed by the Black Lives Matter movement. This is why we need to make Hillary Clinton accountable. And especially accountable for her recent unconscious invocation of the racist history of the colonization of North America, when she suggested that she would have no problems dealing with Donald Trump because, and I quote, "I have a lot of experience dealing with men who sometimes get off the reservation in the way they behave and they speak." Yeah. Well, it seems to me that once she said that, she obviously couldn't grab the words and put them back in her mouth again. But why didn't she lead the country in a conversation about the extent to which racism against indigenous people has become so embedded in the collective psyche that we don't recognize it anymore? But I think that we should ask her to express that accountability by working for the freedom of Leonard Peltier. It has been 40 years since he was arrested in connection with the struggles at Wounded Knee. So here is an image of Leonard, and here are some of his paintings, some of the works that he has produced during the 4 decades he has been behind bars. And I couldn't resist this poster. And we are still here, because indigenous people are always represented as having disappeared, as invisible. When Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012, I thought about David Hammond's 1993 installation that was entitled "In the Hood." And it seems like that work presaged Trayvon Martin and the Dream Defenders and Black Lives Matter. And for those who argue that Black Lives Matter is a slogan, a concept that is based on too narrow, too specific an aspect of humanity, well, I was attempting to address that in the previous conversation. But when one goes to the Black Lives Matter website, one sees even more specific concepts, that one sees calls that increasingly particularize the importance of recognizing the way racism works. If Black lives matter, Black women matter, Black girls matter, Black gay lives matter, Black bi lives matter, Black boys matter, Black queer lives matter, Black men matter, Black lesbians matter, Black trans lives matter, Black immigrants matter, Black incarcerated lives matter, Black differently abled lives matter. Yes, Black lives matter. Latino, Asian American, Native American, Muslim, poor, and working class white people's lives matter. There are many, many more specific instances that we would have to name before we can ethically and comfortably claim that all lives matter. It is not coincidental that one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, is a performance artist. And she understands the importance of challenging what you might call the tyranny of the universal, and the extent to which the universal can conceal internal racialization. She understands the role that art can play in overturning conceptual and material hierarchies that produce relations of subordination. Patrisse Cullors was a member of a delegation that visited Palestine last December 2014. They visited Palestine to express solidarity between the Black movement in the US and the struggle for justice in Palestine. And you know, these are the maps that were in the textbooks that were, I can't remember the specifics, but at some school refused to allow the students to use the textbooks because of the fact that these maps, and unfortunately they aren't that clear, but do you see where Palestine was in 1948? And do you see Palestine in 2014? Which parenthetically makes it difficult to even imagine a two-state solution, because where is the second state? Oh, this is Mando Welanga. This is, unfortunately, the slide is a little bit out of order, but it doesn't matter because Mando Welanga was a political prisoner who recently died after 45 years behind bars. But this is the Ferguson is Palestine. Palestine is Ferguson. And I think that artists in the Black Lives Matter movement, understand how important it is to challenge, to contest what Gayatri Spivak calls the privatization of the imagination. Everything is being privatized, even the imagination. And art can educate the imagination. It is interesting that, at least within the US, the contemporary struggles against racist violence have entered the realm of popular music and jazz. From Janelle Monáe's new single, well, not so new anymore, came out last summer, Hell You Talking About and Say Her Name. We heard Common and John Legend's Glory as we gathered this evening. And then, of course, everybody knows Kendrick Lamar's The Black of the Berry. It was kind of remarkable, wasn't it, that we were able to see that performance during the Grammys on primetime network television. And I have some critiques as well. One of the things that we should learn is that it's possible to be supportive and to be critical at the same time. You don't have to completely embrace everything that you like. And so with Kendrick Lamar, the performance was absolutely amazing. Who's seen visual representation of prisoners with that kind of power? But then he closes with an image of Africa, and Compton is on the map of Africa. And it seems to me that particularly as Black people in this country, as people of African descent, we have to recognize that Africa is something that is far greater than one element of our origin story. We have to recognize the struggles that are unfolding in Africa for justice and for freedom. I guess I could also talk about Beyonce, but everybody's talking about Beyonce, so I don't need to talk about Beyonce. Well, I guess I can also say, since you're encouraging me, I suppose I can also repeat that that one can enjoy intensely enjoy something and at the same time be ambivalent about it. So I can appreciate the openings that have happened as a result of the steps that Beyonce has taken. But there's a corporate capitalist dimension that I would also have to critique. But I do like Terence Blanchard's album, Breathless, inspired by Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe. And of course, we have to pay tribute to Prince. I can remember when, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, when Prince was asked to present Album of the Year at the Grammys, and he got up and he said, like Black lives and books, albums also matter. A quiet and powerful statement. This is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Billie Holiday. I guess it's the 101st now. And her music is being heard both in her own voice and through others. Cassandra Wilson has an amazing new album, Cecile McLaurin-Salvant. And both of them have very moving versions of Strange Fruit. But of course, I have to mention Nina Simone. When we speak about the way in which art can generate the power to contest the status quo, we have to evoke Nina Simone, who devoted her art entirely to struggle. And now I'm happy that she's becoming popular among a new generation. You know, for some people, the anthem of the freedom movement or the civil rights movement was, "We shall overcome." But, you know, some of us argue that the anthem of that movement really should have been, or was, "Mississippi, goddamn." And Nina Simone definitely urged us to stretch our imagination when she sang, "I wish I would know how it would feel to be free," talking about power. Lauryn Hill is the feature artist on a CD that came out about a year ago, which is a tribute to Nina Simone. And Lauryn Hill also narrates Goran Olsen's new documentary on Fanon concerning violence. There have been many visual art exhibitions that have asked us to revisit the relationship between art and struggle. A few years ago, there was the exhibition at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, Now Dig This, which looked at the role of artists in the Los Angeles movement. One of the artists included in that exhibition was David Hammond, whom I evoked earlier. You saw the installation that he called In the Hood, the disembodied sweatshirt hood. And Hammond has described his own practice as tragic magic, in which he takes the, quote, discarded vestiges of Black life and transforms them, restoring to them a lost potency reinvested with the power of the fetish. And I wish we had to had time to talk a bit more about the ways in which artists themselves imagine their contributions to the freedom struggle. But there's not too much time left, so I'm going to show you, and I wish I was able to share more prison art with you. But this is a piece by a prisoner, Clinari Giovanni. It's called Half Surrender. And again, I like the power that a kind of softness is able to generate. And it reminds me that Herman Wallace, getting back to the theme of political prisoners, was released in October of 2013 after spending 41 years in solitary confinement. And do you know what this is? It's actually an art photograph, but do you know what it depicts? Does anybody recognize it? Huh? Does anybody recognize? Yes. Exercise cages. These are exercise cages for people who are held in solitary confinement. In 2003, the artist Jackie Sumel asked Herman Wallace a very simple question. She asked, "What kind of house does a man who has lived in a 6-foot by 9-foot cell for over 30 years dream of?" And this is the installation, and that is the cell he lived in. And he imagined a house with flowers and with grass and, not that distinctive a house, but someplace where he could be with his family and friends. And you may know that when Herman was released, he died 3 days later. But let me begin to wind up my remarks by saying that these are important times. They're wonderful times to be young. This is the most wonderful time to be young. And I guess I can't see the audience that well, but I assume that there are a bunch of young people out there. Am I right? This is a great time to be young. But it's also a good time to be old. Because we have been waiting for this all our lives. We have been waiting for decades. And the turn toward struggle in art, in music, in theater, in visual art is really a sign that we are in a particular historical conjuncture where change has become a real possibility. I say possibility, which does not mean that it's going to happen. It will not happen if we do not make it happen. But this is precisely the time to become involved in all of the various ways that we can become involved in struggle. But let's remember that in this country, we're currently engaging with racist violence, the same thing is happening in other places. In Europe, especially with respect to violence against against migrants, against refugees. The immigration crisis has reached massive proportions. And of course, this is the post-colonial revenge that Europe is now experiencing. And that we in this country should pay attention to, because it is not as if the United States of America is immune when it comes to responsibility for the great crisis with respect to the refugees in Europe. As a matter of fact, who invaded Iraq? Who invaded Afghanistan? Who is responsible for the upsurges in Syria? Racism is a global phenomenon. And the power of art as power, the power of art can help us to decolonize our minds. This is what Ngugi wa Thiong'o told us we had to do a long time ago. If the popularization of more complex analyses of racism and misogyny, especially those that have developed within the context of the Black and women of color feminisms, if this can assist us to understand how deeply embedded racist violence is in our country's historical, economic, and ideological structures, these new ways of talking about racism, the structural and institutional character of racism, can help us to grasp the global reach of our struggles. And this is why we might recognize that we have major responsibility to end the occupation of Palestine. Particularly given the extent to which the U.S. government is the main financial backer of the occupation. And we also have to recognize the central role that Islamophobia has come to play with respect to the spread of racism more broadly. In the aftermath of September 11th, 2001, Islamophobia has begun to redefine the whole terrain of racism. And so deeper understandings of racist violence arm us against deceptive solutions. When we are told, when young people are shot down in the street by the police, that we need better police. We need policemen and women and police people of other gender identities who are not going to engage in that kind of violence. But it's the institution that is saturated and embedded with the violence. That violence will continue unless we recognize and begin to transform its structural character. When we're told that we simply need better prisons, I don't know what a better prison is. A better prison is no prison. But when we are told that we simply need better police and better prisons, we counter with what we really need. Excuse me, we need to, excuse my cold, I caught a cold in Hawaii. Go figure. But we need to reimagine security. which will involve the abolition of policing and imprisonment as we know them today. We say demilitarize the police, disarm the police, abolish the institution of the police as we know it, and abolish imprisonment as the dominant mode of punishment. But when we do that, we will have only just begun. Power, justice, sustainability. And bring the music up a bit. And let's see if we can reflect during the next few moments. This is Christian Scott on trumpet and Elena, a wonderful young flutist, Elena Penderhughes on flute. And it's called Liberation from the Gangsterism. Thank you. We have a little time for dialogue, exchange, so yeah, that was enough applause. Okay.
Coming, coming.
I don't engage with the arts like probably most people here. I have no background in it. I wouldn't call myself an artist. I didn't study it. I have attention span of a fly. When I have to come to the museum, it's about an hour. I can look at some stuff and then I gotta go, right? And
Yeah, I can
still,
relate to that.
I would describe a lot of my professional life as the act of performance art, especially when we're talking about representation of race, gender, and class, right? I code switch, I'm not even gonna lie about that, but one of the projects that I've been on for the last probably decade has been to show up at work, embrace some of the stereotypes of blackness, black masculinity in particular. By the way, I'm an F to M man, and I've had to understand what it means to be a black man to other people outside of myself. And so when I go to work, half of my day is performance art. I'm not gonna lie, right? I perform.
Could you stand over here?
Yes.
You
Okay.
know, I can't see you because the light is directly in my eye.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's better. Oh, thank you.
I perform what I think is acceptable standard behavior, professionalism, which I really think of as basically white, upper class, educated, cultural behavior, but we call it professionalism because we imagine that was born at the beginning of the universe, and this thing called professionalism has nothing to do with like being white in America, and so I perform that too, and I use $20 words when like really a 5-cent one would have done. But then I turn around and I invoke the vernacular of Jay-Z. I'm like, Jigga, what's up? And so I switch back and forth between that, and I'm very intentional about it. And I also understand that the repercussions that can come to me because of that. Part of my project, though, is performance. It is I want to resist the idea that any particular culture, any brand, the dialect of English that my parents spoke is not improper English, but it is a dialect that is okay and it is fine. But we live in a culture that has said that this is bad, and my ability to prove to you that I'm educated, I have to tell you that I went to UC Davis. I don't really want to. I can still talk like my parents did. I'm performing all the time. I get tired. I'm not an artist. I'm not on a particular project, but I'm very aware every day when I go to work that I'm a performer. I am performing blackness. I'm embracing whatever I was told I shouldn't be embracing. I listen in my headphones while I do data analysis and sing really loudly. Beyonce, Lemonade, you know what I'm saying? I gotta do that, right? I perform all the time. I wouldn't call myself an artist because I don't know about a lot of what you were talking about, but I embrace it. But I'm wondering if I put the question to you, like, where does the experience of like living day to day, the performance like I do, like, and I'm really conscientious about when I code switch and when I don't, right? I'm not gonna code switch right now because I believe I have the right to be black in this office. I'm going code switch right now because I
Okay,
believe this
yeah,
is.
I mean, I think I'm getting the gist of your
Yeah.
your question. Yeah, performativity. I mean, most of us do that to a certain extent. Maybe it's more intentional in your experience, but I think we all engage in that kind of performativity. But I would really like us to think about something that's slightly different, and that is the way in which we all need art, the way in which our own creativity has been, if we're not people who made a conscious decision to become artists, our creativity has most of the time been stunted. All of us have some creative potential. All of us can make art. I mean, it may not be the art that will be embraced by the art world, which is about money, which is about capitalism, which is about profit. But I think we should take seriously the degree to which we need that in order to live, in order to survive. Now, what you're talking about, I'm not sure whether you would say that there's like one way you would prefer to be all the time. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe
I would
we
prefer to
all
be
have,
a Negro all the time.
Huh? You would?
I would prefer to be a Negro and what that means to me all the time.
Well, they're all different kinds of Negroes, I'm telling you.
You know, okay.
So,
what that means to me.
That's not really telling me too much. and I wish we could, continue to engage in this, but I totally appreciate, what you're saying, and the fact that you're conscious of it. But I would also think that what you assume may be one comfortable way to be in the world may not turn out to be so comfortable, if you actually found a way to inhabit that one way of being. But thank you.
Thank you.
For the question.
Hello, how are you doing? It's very exciting to be here. This is my first open engagement. I'm here with my business partner, part business owner of an organic farm in Washington State. So we traveled a little bit far to come here. My question to you, and if I don't really know if it's a question or not, but here we go. My business partner, she is white. And my question to you is, do you have any advice for us as far as going forward in our business? Any advice as far as racist issues or anything? Washington State is...
Well, let me say that I think it's great that you have an organic farm.
Yes.
It's really absolutely amazing. And I mean, you told me your partner is white, but that doesn't tell me anything.
Well, here's my question, I guess. Any advice that you have for us going forward in our business, if we have any issues come up as far as racism?
You are going to have some issues come up.
I know, but I would really like to hear some advice going forward in our business.
There's like no easy fix to racism. Okay. Everybody assumes that
advice.
There's like one thing we can do to avoid it, but it's a constant struggle. And I think that, and not only for white people, Black people, and other people of color are also infected with the ideologies of racism. And we have to learn how to acknowledge the extent to which we're implicated in racism. And this is something that is not going to take, 2 weeks, a 2-week, what do you call it? Intensive, yes. I mean, it's not even going to take a year long. It's not going to happen as a result of a year-long intensive, or a 5 or 20 or even probably 100 years. So we have to recognize that the work that we are doing now can potentially create transformations that will not be fully experienced for many generations. And I think that in many ways this is the vision of artists who often aren't caught up in that temporal notion that when my life ends, the world ends with me, right? Because most of us assume, having been influenced by capitalism and neoliberal ideologies, that the frame of the world consists of our birth date and our death date. So we're not really interested in what happens when we're gone. But we have to learn how to be interested. We have to recognize that this is collective work. This is community work. And our community stretches not only beyond borders, not only beyond geographic borders, but it stretches across generations. And we're in community with people who have not yet been born. But I will say that organic farming, we need more of it. But we also have to respect the land, and we have to respect the workers, because so many organic farmers don't consider that when they pay agricultural workers less than minimum wage, they're perpetuating the very system they think they're contesting by growing organic food.
I have a question back here.
I just want to say first off, thank you so much for what you just said. I've had an amazing open engagement. I'm here with a student group all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And I just want to say, growing up in very displaced places, I grew up in New Zealand. I'm originally from Congo in Africa. I left because of the genocide. And traveling around and trying to find my place in life, it's taken me having to look to the only thing that I was able to see on TV, which was like African American culture and people that was close to any form of representation of myself. And having to like go to nations where I have to like work and find my way around meeting indigenous communities who like, forced me to have to look internally to dismantle the white supremacists inside myself in order to see outside myself. And seeing your work and what you've done from like people that have inspired me close to me, like Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and I have to say you are like a dream come true being able to stand here and see you. So thank you. I don't really have a question, but I just want to say thank you for existing.
Well,
we have a question here in the back.
Let me just say that I'm actually a real person, and with no higher powers, and I'm only standing here because of the combined efforts of vast numbers of people all over the world. So I guess I see myself as a witness to the power of community and the power of solidarity. So I always have to demystify that, whatever it is that causes people to see me as a dream come true. And I can tell you that that community is always crosses generations. And I guess you can say the person I've known longer than any other person in the world is in the audience, and that is my mother's best friend, and she just turned 101. Her name is Dorothy Burnham. Don't forget that name. And she decided, after having had a career in science and teaching, college level science courses, she decided to become an artist. How old were you, Dorothy? You remember? 1915. When you started doing art? When my children were going to art school. Oh, she started doing art when her children were going to art school. But I think she began to exhibit when she was in her 70s? In her 70s. So if you need, I don't like the term role model, and people are always kind of bringing me into that role. And I feel very uncomfortable because I don't necessarily think that people need to be the way, I have too many problems for me to want people to be like me. Not any more than most people, but Dorothy Burnham is the role model. Thank you, Dorothy. Okay. I don't see where.
I'm back here, all the way in the back. Hello.
Oh, there.
I'm going to preface this, and it may seem like a half-formed thought, so I'll just say that in advance. So a bit of context. I grew up in rural Minnesota, which is very, 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 very white. White potatoes, white chickens, white everything. And I've been doing social practice work for about 15 years before I even knew what I was doing. About 3 years ago, I was invited by an elementary school teacher in a city, a larger city, Minneapolis, to work on a project with her class, her youth. And I was very excited about it at first, but I decided to turn down the invitation because I didn't want to be a parachute artist. And it was implied to me by a number of people that how dare I, a white female, go into their neighborhood and try to do some type of project with them. And it was around the idea of how technology as a form of communication influences our ability to relate to each other and read social cues and body language and those types of things. So I guess my question is, I've been struggling and kind of bouncing back and forth with it in my head for a long time, but my question is, if there was one piece of advice you could give young social practice artists about working with communities that are either somewhat unfamiliar or one that they do not recognize as their own, especially where race or gender or other forms of identification call into question, what would it be? Not a loaded question at all.
No, it's just that there's not one. I mean, I can't just give you one piece of advice because it's a complicated situation. And I think that we're always trying to discover easy solutions. And, what I want us to do is to become more complicated and recognize the complexity. And the situation you describe is so complex. There's so many issues that you have to deal with that there's no way in the world I could just give you one piece of advice. I mean, if there were only one piece of advice, it would be, well, just don't do it. But if you're seriously committed, then that means you have to commit yourself to educational processes. You really have to become a part of the community that you're working with. And racial identity doesn't prevent one from becoming a part of a community that may not fit your identity. History creates that. Work creates that. And so I would say that if you're willing to do this work for the long run, if you're willing to recognize the protracted nature of it, then we could sit down and I could tell you some of my experiences, and I could, share with you some ideas. And I would begin by saying, and this is not the one piece of advice you ask for, but I would begin by saying that that you have to figure out how to find some humility. And you have to recognize that when you work with a community that appears to be less privileged than you are, it's important to recognize that if you don't undo that hierarchical relationship, then you're going to end up replicating the very problems you're trying to challenge. So I would say, first of all, ask yourself, what can you learn? So rather than assume that it's all about your, sharing your knowledge or your experience or your talents with a community that has not been so privileged, ask yourself, how can you learn? What will be the epistemological value of your work with that? What knowledges can you discover in the process of working with that community? And that's just the first. Maybe one more? Okay, one more, and then I'm told that this is the yeah. She's been standing up for a long time back there. I really apologize that we can't have a longer session.
Hi, my name's Lucy, and I'd just like to apologize if I sound shaky. I just can't believe I'm talking to you right now. Just for a piece of context, I'm Tongan, which is an island off the Pacific. I'm 15 years old, and recently I held a 3-day protest at my school for blatant racism that was displayed upon my eyes and upon many others, and no one said anything about it, so I chose to do something about it. And so me and 6 other students, we chose to hold a 3-day anti-racism protest at my school, which went very well. And it taught me, oh geez, no. it taught me that being colored and being happy with myself and who I am is pure defiance against our society in itself. And I'd just like to say thank you to you, first of all. But my question to you mainly is, for young activists like myself, what is the best piece of advice you have for us to sorry, I know that you just asked that, I'm sorry. To make a change, but also not step over the change or speak over the change that has already been made. That's been my main struggle with trying not to speak over the Black community, trying to be an activist for Black Lives Matter and for Indigenous lives and for Polynesian lives, etc. So what's your best piece of advice to youth, the youth right now who are trying to be activists with social media and all the types of stuff in our generation?
Well, I mean, that is a good question. And as I was saying before, it's all about entering into processes. There's no way that you can solve all of these issues. But I think that having just spent about a month at the University of Hawaii in Mount Noah, and having met with many young Hawaiian sovereignty activists, I kept thinking to myself, there are ways in which people, say Black people, who feel that they have led their entire lives in the struggle for freedom. There are ways in which we can learn, so many important lessons from those who are engaging in other struggles. And so I would say that, thinking about how we share our stories with each other and how we create community. And oftentimes it's assumed that community only happens when you can figure out what you have that is the same as what everybody else has who wants to be a part of the community. So we look for this common denominator, and that becomes that around which we organize community. But to me, that's pretty boring, because if we already have it, why do we have to search for it in others? It's like a very narcissistic idea about how to create community. So my question would be, how do we produce situations where we learn other stories? And how can we, following the guidance of Audre Lorde, how do we use difference as a way of bringing communities together? And that can be really exciting, really exciting. And that is what people fear so much. And racism is largely responsible for this fear of difference and this assumption that the only way you can be in the world is the way you have always been, and the way the people you call your community are. So I think we have to start taking some risk. We have to be bold, and I think artists can help us do that. Because artists are willing to step out there and try to imagine something that has never been imagined before, or to create something that has never been created before. And so I want to end this session by thanking all of you for coming and by saying, power to the artists.